Alright guys, let's talk about lesson 2, which is categories and properties of elements. So first we need to identify where there are certain elements found on the periodic table. As you can see by this diagram, all of the metals are found to the left side of the periodic table, all the areas in the pink. All of the nonmetals are found in the blue part of the periodic table, and all of the metalloids are in this green section here in the middle that surround this stair step. Element groups. So first is group 1, that's the alkali metals. They all have one valence electron because they're in group 1. They will lose that one electron to form +1 ions, so they will all be +1 ions. They're extremely reactive with water, and the most reactive metal out of all of these is francium here at the bottom. Group 2 are the alkaline earth metals. They have 2 valence electrons, and when they lose those 2 valence electrons, they will form +2 ions. They are not as reactive in water, but still the reactivity will increase as we go down the group. Group 3 through 12 are where our transition metals are going to be. They are the least reactive metals, and when we dissolve these metals into solution, we get colored ions. So right here we have a sample of silver. Right here we have gold, and this is actually copper ions in solution. They actually turn the solution blue. Group 17 is the halogens. They have 7 valence electrons. They will all gain 1 electron to form -1 ions very easily, and the most reactive nonmetal is fluorine. So fluorine is the most reactive nonmetal. It's all the way up at the top. Francium, like we saw a couple slides ago, is the most reactive nonmetal, and that's all the way down at the bottom left. Group 18 are what we call the noble gases. They are unreactive or inert gases. They all have a stable octet or 8 valence electrons, except helium. Helium only has 2 electrons in it, and they're all monoatomic, which means one atom is found in nature. And so we have neon. Neon, as you can see by here, and we saw in the bright lights lab, actually burns orange. And we have a picture of xenon here, which actually burns purple. Hydrogen is not part of any group. It is a nonmetal and a gas at standard temperatures and pressure. It is placed in group 1 because of the fact that it has 1 valence electron, but it's not an alkali metal like the rest of group 1 is. So let's talk about some properties of metals. Metals are malleable, which means they can be hammered or rolled into thin sheets. They're ductile, which means they can be drawn into a wire. They're excellent conductors of heat and electricity. They have a luster or a shine to them. They lose electrons to form cations, so all metals are going to be positively charged. And they're solid at standard temperature and pressure, and the exception is mercury. Mercury is the only metal that is a liquid at room temperature. Then we have, when we look at metals on the atomic level, they have what we call the sea of mobile electrons. And this is how that they can conduct electricity. So in this picture, we have all of these positive cations that are all metal atoms. And then in these little red dots are all of our free-moving electrons. And since the electrons can move freely throughout this positively charged metal ions, they can conduct electricity, and the electricity can flow very easily through anything that is metallic. So let's talk about metallic character. Metallic character is described as how much like a metal is an element. Francium is the most metallic element on the periodic table. That's the one that's all the way down here on the bottom left. Right there. So francium is the most metallic, so the closer the element is to francium, the more metallic it's going to be, and the further away from francium the element is, the less metallic it's going to be. So most metallic is francium, least metallic is going to be fluorine, and fluorine's all the way up in the top right corner of your periodic table. All right, let's look at metallic character. As you go down a group, metallic character will increase as you get closer and closer to francium. As you go across a period, it will get less metallic because you're getting further and further away from francium. So let's talk about the metalloids. Now the metalloids are going to be these elements that are in this little purple section that I've circled over here in this little picture. They are semiconductors. They are which means they're a good to moderate conductor. They have a luster like metals, but are brittle like nonmetals, and they're used for making microchips and that we use in computers. Silicon is a great example. And a lot of your microchips, your cell phones, such things like that, you have a lot of silicon in there. Now let's look at properties of nonmetals. Nonmetals are poor conductors of heat and electricity. They are brittle, which means that if you hit them with a hammer, they'll break and shatter into small pieces. They're dull, so they don't have any shine to them whatsoever, and they tend to gain electrons to form anions. So all of the nonmetals that we're going to see in class are going to be negatively charged when they form an ion. So let's look at this and summarize these elements. So metals are malleable, ductile, shiny, excellent conductors of heat and electricity because of those mobile electrons. They lose electrons, form positive ions, and we're going to talk about this low electronegativity and ionization energy in lesson 3A and 3B. The metalloids are in between, and here are your 6 metalloids that you need to memorize. Nonmetals are brittle, dull, poor conductors of heat and electricity. They gain electrons, form negative ions, and they have a high electronegativity and high ionization energy. So let's look at the practice. Which of the following are symbols for halogen elements? So let's remember, based on your notes and what we've talked about, pause the video and answer the question. Welcome back. The element that you should have selected is chlorine. Chlorine is the element that out of that group that is the halogen. Let's look at practice 2. We're going to identify each property below as being more characteristic of a metal or a nonmetal. So think about what we listed as characteristics of metals and nonmetals when you answer this question. Pause the video and answer them on your own. Welcome back. If it is brittle, that is a characteristic of a nonmetal. If it's malleable, that's characteristic of a metal. Poor conductors of electricity are nonmetals. Shiny things are metallic. And tend to gain electrons would be a nonmetal. Check your understanding. Why is hydrogen a nonmetal but is listed on the metal side of the periodic table? I want you to think about this and try and answer this in your notes, and we're going to talk about this first thing tomorrow in class. Check your understanding too. In which pair of elements are the chemical properties of the elements most similar? Sodium and chlorine, nitrogen and phosphorus, boron and oxygen. Again, answer this in your packet, and we'll talk about this first thing tomorrow.